1993, Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director.
It's just been very nice because I've been directing films for 23 years. Out of the 39 I've been in the business, and this comes out of a lot of the small films I've made, the Honky Tonk Mans and the Bronco Billies and Big Isle in 1969, and a lot of films that where I thought I took chances. Okay, just pull right in, a little more. Come here, Thunder. Oops. Ooh. Look around down here on the ground. Get out of here. Chicken out.
I know what you're thinking. Did he fire 6 shots or only 5?
My name is Dave Garver.
Moving, moving, moving. Oh, they're disapproving. Keep them doggies moving.
I did fall in love with him the minute he was born, and I don't think I ever fell out. He was the biggest baby born in St. Francis Hospital in San Francisco, and they took him all around to show the other ladies what they might have done. In the Eastwood group, they only had one name. They didn't have a middle name. So there was no way of cheating on it. I just called him Clinton. It's unbelievable that my baby boy is going to turn 70.
Both Ruth Runner and Clinton Eastwood were native Californians. They'd known each other since their childhood. They'd even gone to the same school together.
We met in high school, and it was sort of a given that we would get married someday. And we did. We waited till he was 21 and I was 18.
When they married, Clinton Sr. was working as a bond salesman. When the crash came, his commissions dwindled to nothing. After a brief period working for his brother-in-law's refrigeration business, desperate for work, he took up a friend's offer of a post at Standard Oil, 400 miles south in Los Angeles. It turned out to be a job pumping gas. For the rest of the 30s, the Eastwood family roamed California. Jobs came and went as Clinton Sr. followed the work.
Drifting, it's always been fascinating to me because in that period of time, in the 30s, adults did drift. You drifted wherever work was or rumors of work were.
And I know we both feel that we have been had.
Hey, that's good, Oz.
me write that down.
We lived in Redding and Sacramento and Pacific Palisades and back to Sacramento and all over the place. But we weren't destitute. You remember those things. Sometimes they're the things that you remember the most.
So I lost my woman, and you lost your man. And who knows who's right or who's wrong?
There was no such thing as welfare and no such thing as unemployment. When you were out, you're out. So your family struggled harder, and so you appreciated your family more. I think interesting time.
I got my guitar and I got a plan. Do 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 do.
Throw your arms around this honky-tonk man. How's that?
Damn, boy, you've got this songwriting stuff down. Hey, how about that? Throw your arms around this honky-tonk man. Throw your arms around this honky-tonk man. And we'll get through the night the best way we can.
I like a certain amount of efficiency in filmmaking because my dad was always an efficiency-conscious person. And he didn't like waste. You didn't stack the plates, because if you stacked the plates, you'd get the plate dirty on both sides, and so you'd have to wash it use twice that amount of water, as opposed to, it was that kind of mentality that you had in the 30s where you were saving on everything. You turned the lights off because it was electrical. Everything was based upon saving something. It was on not wasting a resource. So that has a certain effect on you. And then you like certain kinds of music, so that has an effect on you. Like certain kind of movies. You become a product of what your environment has been. Most people do, I think. Their idiosyncrasies that they take on in later years are usually based upon childhood impressions.
He was full of fun, and his toys were interesting. They all talked and did things that other children didn't do, and he had quite a interesting play. At least it was interesting to me, I thought. I used to sit and listen to him. He had a friend named Bill, who was one of his toys, and I used to listen to him and think it was fun.
You didn't always know people. You didn't. Sometimes you move out to a farm out in Sacramento or something. There were no kids around. The nearest kid maybe 4 or 5 miles down the road, and maybe you went to a school and you met a few, but you didn't really know anybody. You weren't really in the clique, so to speak. So you played imaginary games. You played with an imaginary playmates and what have you. So that's kind of like acting. That's kind of the closest thing to it. Kids act all the time. They're the greatest actors in the world because they can play believable scenes with one another. I guess that's why a lot of actors act childlike when they're out in public.
Stick 'em up or I'll plug you.
They basically haven't grown up.
I ought to have the whole bunch of you strung out for cattle rustling.
We just wanted to talk to Bronco Billy.
All right, turn around nice and easy. You mean you little pards played hooky from school just to come see me?
Wow, look at his guns. He really is Bronco Billy.
Put your hands down.
Are you really the fastest guy in the West? Wow. Wow.
Ain't nobody faster than Bronco Billy.
The Eastwood family fortunes finally changed in 1940 when Clinton Sr. found a job working for a well-known San Franciscan jewelers. They returned to the Bay Area. The Oakland-San Francisco Bay Bridge had just been built. In its day, it was the longest bridge in the world. It linked San Francisco to its cousin towns of Oakland and Berkeley across the bay and secured prosperity for the whole area. When one of Ruth's aunts put her house up for sale, the Eastwoods were able to buy it. It was in Piedmont, a suburb of Oakland proper. They were to remain there for the next 8 years.
It's kind of a funny little community of its own. But I grew up there, so it was home, and so did my husband. So it was home to us. I went to Piedmont High, and when we got the chance to buy a relative's house, we knew everybody up there, and we knew the real estate people, and we bought it for practically nothing. But anyway, it was a wonderful house, and we loved it. It's still my favorite house in the whole world.
Clinton Jr. was enrolled in Piedmont Junior School. Both of his parents had gone there.
I once did a play as part of an English project, a one-act play, when I was in junior high school. We were kind of a hit, but I was such a nervous wreck. I was ready to cut school. I just didn't figure that was my bag. The part of the lead in the play was an introverted kid, and I was an introverted kid, so my teacher picked me for the job, figuring that I'd just act myself. Well, we got through it, but I made up my mind then I'd never get involved with anything to do with acting again.
His father, he also had a lot of things to say, like if you don't study, you'll never be anything. You'll have to work for what you get. I can hear him saying those things. And I often wish that he could see him and know that it wasn't that way, really. We had a piano, and belonged to his grandmother Anderson, and so it was in the family. But anyway, he would sit down and play, just, he could pick up, a tune and pick it out on the piano.
It's still playable. It was old then. It was old when I started playing on it, but it was about the only item that we ever had as a kid that sort of traveled with the family that was of any great value.
No one to talk with all by myself. No one to walk with, but I'm happy on the shelf. Ain't misbehaving, saving all my love for you. You fine rascal, you. I know for certain the one I love. I'm through with flirting, it's you that I'm thinking of.
My mother was somewhat of a jazz enthusiast, so it kind of rubbed off and was passed down to me the same way. When Fats Waller died, the year he died, she came home with a bunch of records, big 12-inch 78s.
Believe me, dear.
So I started listening to them, and first you're impressed by the amusing lyrics, and that gets you going. And then after a while you say, well, besides the amusing lyrics and an interesting, fun-sounding voice, here's a guy who actually plays very well, too.
Of pig buttermilk. Look what's going on here. Come out of there, you rascal, you.
The Omar was a bar in downtown Oakland. It sold pizzas and had a vacancy for a piano player.
Let's belly
In the 40s, Oakland had the largest black population west of Detroit and a thriving jazz and rhythm and blues scene.
I used to sneak down into a saloon in downtown Oakland when I was 16. I'd play at night, and the guys, they'd feed me pizzas and give me all the beer I wanted to drink. Once in a while, I'd get a tip or something.
The young Clint Eastwood's enthusiasm for jazz extended to weekend trips to the famous Central Avenue in Los Angeles, where the biggest names in contemporary jazz could be heard and seen.
I went to see the Dizzy Gillespie Orchestra when I went into it, lied about my age and went into a nightclub and heard them, and I thought that was very exciting. And then I saw Charlie Parker and Lester Young, Coleman Hawkins, and just a wild group of people. That sort of turned me on to modern jazz.
At 16, Eastwood moved from Piedmont High School to Oakland Technical School, an institution more geared to practical studies. In his spare time, he pursued his love of jazz, living, as he was later to describe it, an American graffiti type of adolescence. At school, he followed a course in aircraft maintenance. A few months before he was due to graduate, his father got a better job in Seattle. After graduation, Eastwood followed his family north and worked all over the Northwest as a lifeguard, at the Bethlehem Steelworks, at the Boeing aircraft factory, and as a lumberjack. He drifted from job to job till he was 21.
Well, I'm drifting and I'm drifting like a ship out on the sea. Well, I'm drifting and I'm drifting.
Finally, Eastwood had applied to Seattle University to enroll in a music course. Before he knew whether he'd been accepted, he was called up. It was 1951, the height of the Korean War.
In this world,
Eastwood was based at Fort Ord on the California coast. He was to see no active service. His skills as a lifeguard led to a post supervising the base swimming pool. There he served his 2 years.
take me back again. If my baby.
He learned to swim early at the beach. In fact, he was on his father's shoulders when he was about 4 years old, and a wave swept him off. And all I saw was his little foot going down out to sea. But anyway, they recovered him, and he doesn't remember this. And he says he remembers it, but he wasn't fearful about it. He just thought it was part of swimming, I guess.
Returning to Fort Ord from a weekend in Seattle visiting his family, Eastwood hitched a ride on a two-man aircraft. It came down in the Pacific. He lost sight of the pilot, and to reach shore, he had to swim several miles through powerful currents and stretches of kelp floating on the surface of the icy water.
They wakened me at 7 in the morning, the newspaper, saying, "Are you related to the Eastwood that went down in the bay last night?" And I almost fainted, but I recovered enough to say that I was. And it was really a horrible experience.
Eastwood's military career was otherwise uneventful. However, he had his first brush with the movie business.
A lot of the actors, a lot of the younger actors had all been drafted in the service, and they were there when I was at Fort Ord, and guys that I had seen, and some in big parts and some in small parts, and were all kind of out. They were all out in movies on the post while they were there as trainees. So it was kind of an interesting time.
After his discharge, Eastwood enrolled with no great conviction in a business administration course at the Los Angeles City College. He kept up with some of the actor friends he made at Fort Ord. The college was renowned for its drama department, which was so strong that Hollywood studios would send their players to its classes. Eastwood had been supplementing his meager GI Bill allowance digging swimming pools. He decided to try his hand.
You'd sit there and play scenes and play different elements of scenes and then improvise scenes, and you do everything but from playing chickens to teapots. It's all kind of ridiculous. It's not it's not a very masculine art form.
Clint's one of the most practical human beings I've ever known. I mean, he really wants to know how things work. And here was something that I think he'd not taken too seriously, and here he found himself with people who were taking it seriously and were talking about a tradition of acting, talking about methods of acting that were you could break down and work on step by step by step. I think that all was very appealing to him. I think he suddenly said, wait a minute, it's not just a thing for cute guys and cute girls. It's something that's a codified, teachable subject.
In the early 50s, there was a revolution in acting, led by James Dean and Marlon Brando. They seemed to mine their individuality in the same way as Eastwood's jazz heroes. They affected the same cool demeanor and intense self-expression. Eastwood had to find his own way into this rarefied universe. Encouraged by friends, Eastwood auditioned for the Universal Studios talent program. He was accepted.
Dropping napalm, follow an order.
When I was signed at Universal, actually, he was in the class. The result that they wanted were stars then, and they wanted to mold them into elegant women and he-men and, you know, that kind of thing. And Clint was he was a perfect subject for that because he was a phenomenal listener. He was absorbing everything. So when you think of him in terms of was he interested in acting, I think very much so. But he was also interested in the whole picture. And that's why he's so versatile today.
The three young men featured in this scene, Rex Reason, Grant Williams, and Clint Eastwood, were discovered and developed right here on our lot.
Just like all the other people around here didn't know what he was talking about.
That's funny. You'd think he'd know something. He's as blind as you are.
Hey, I think I hear surf. Yeah, I feel a groundswell. The beach must be dead ahead.
Dr. Bell's waiting for him in surgery, sir.
What is it, Will? Telephone, Dr. Parker.
All right. Should study these when they're dry. Harry, I'll call you tomorrow from Chicago to see if they answer our question.
Good luck with your speech, sir.
Oh, thank you, Will. I'll need it.
Doc, didn't you say that among the lower animals there were no natural enemies as long as they were well fed?
Yeah, something like that.
Well, maybe so, Doc, but there were 4 rats in there when I changed my lights. Now there's only 3. It's my considered opinion that rat number 4 is sitting inside that cat.
Are you sure you fed them all this morning?
Sure, I always feed them. How'd you get in here?
Clint didn't hang out as much with everyone because Clint, I think, to my knowledge, was the only one married. And he was seriously married. Maggie was a bathing suit model, gorgeous. She was with him. She was his wife, and that was that. She was very quiet. He was very serious, more serious, and as I said, more introspective. He absorbed everything. It was like going to college.
Brando came to the class. We had a lot of people. Dan O'Hurley and Rod Steiger, Marlon Brando all came. We had various people would come by, and it was fun to watch the different personalities. Dan O'Hurley, who had been nominated for an Academy Award that particular year, he put it down. He said, "Oh, just stage acting and movie acting is all the same, and it's just the deal, and just get with it." And Brando didn't want to talk too much about it because he just talked about, handling yourself in the career. I don't think he wanted to intellectualize. I think he always looked down on acting as sort of something that was he shouldn't be doing as an American male or something like that. And Steiger, he wanted to project some cerebral attack on it, and everybody talked about the method all the time. Sometimes people try to make brain surgery or nuclear physics out of acting, and it isn't either of those. It isn't that. It's a very animalistic art form. Actually, one of my favorite actors was Jimmy Cagney, who I'm not at all alike. There was a certain energy there.
How you doing, Parker?
Stuffy in here. I need some air.
Oh, stuffy, huh? I'll give it a layer.
At that time, people must have thought this guy's crazy. Cagney, what I loved about Cagney as a kid growing up, and as an adult watching him too, is that even though a character like that is as far from him in real life as can be, but he wasn't afraid to play very bold. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't begging to be liked. A lot of actors would have been afraid to do that at that time. He had that theory of planting both feet and tell the truth, which was his sort of summation of acting, and that's one way of saying it. Yeah, be honest, tell the truth, be yourself.
Now you edge over a little bit, Mr. Maverick. I don't want to get a bill for that mirror.
He did some Maverick episodes. I don't know how many he did. He did one or two. You could just tell Clint was going to be somebody. I mean, he had great stage presence. We had, something like 5 or 6 Westerns here on the Warner Brothers lot at the time. And they were big. I think when I went on with Maverick, there were 16 or 17 Westerns on.
Get 'em up! Move 'em out! Keep moving, moving, moving. Though they're disapproving, keep them doggies moving.
In the 50s and 60s, Los Angeles became not just the film capital of the world, but the television entertainment capital. It produced I Love Lucy, Dragnet, 77 Sunset Strip, and above all, Westerns. They dominated television on both sides of the Atlantic. The most popular of all was Rawhide, and its most popular character was Rowdy Yates, who over the course of its 7-year run made Clint Eastwood a household name.
Right, I'm in Rawhide.
Plenty of places to hold them off once we're across.
I don't think that wagon's gonna make it across that stream.
We'll have to try. I haven't got time to look for a fording. Look, we'll unhitch the team, take them across. There's a block and fall up front there.
The first time I had a scene with Clint, I was playing a Native American, and it was a scene with witches out on the plains.
That's good. I pick up white man's ways, mission school.
Mission school, huh?
I'd played Macbeth several times, so I kind of recognized something about familiar. In Macbeth, its Banquo says about the witches, it said, "Are these things real as we do talk about, or have we eaten on the insane root that takes the reason prisoner?" And but the line in Rawhide, when Clint came up, as my Indian brother says, are these things real that we do talk about? And I say, Cordero has eaten of the dark mushroom, which takes the reason prisoner.
Cordero has eaten of the dark mushroom. His words are without sense.
Clint started breaking up, and I did too, and we kept ruining the take. And the director said, "What's the matter with you guys? You know, what's so funny?" I said, "It's that dark mushroom line." I said, "Can't we say insane root or something like that, or poison seed or something?" And I said, "This kind of reminds me of Macbeth." And the guy says, "Of course it does. It's a Western rewrite."
I die. It is my time. Your coffee is the best I ever drink.
Clint and myself and Steve McQueen, well, I guess Charlie Bronson, came out of television, and not many people came out of television, and there was a stigma attached to it as far as motion picture goes. They said, well, they won't pay to see you if you're on there for free.
Eastwood appeared in hundreds of episodes of Rawhide. As Rowdy Yates, he enjoyed a particular affection from the audience on both sides of the Atlantic, especially the young. Television might have led to Hollywood film studios keeping their distance, but at that time, Hollywood rules were not the only ones in the world.
A friend of mine suggested we go down to a little theater on Western Avenue in Los Angeles and see this film by this man who had done The Seven Samurai called Yojimbo, and we didn't know what to expect. About halfway through the picture, I said, this would make a wonderful Western, but nobody would ever have nerve to do it. Years went by, and my agent offered me a job to go to Italy, Spain, Italian, Spanish, German co-production, to go over there and make this Western film, and I didn't want to do it. I didn't even want to read it because I had been doing Rawhide day in, day out for the last 2 or 3 years, and I said I wasn't interested in that, and he said, well, I promised the Rome office that you would give it a read. So I looked at it, and it was called Il Straniero was the title, The Stranger, and he no, it was called Magnifico Straniero, Magnificent Stranger, and so I read a few pages of it, and right away, about the part way into it, I was fascinated to see Yojimbo appearing.
I really wanted James Coburn, but he was too expensive. The Italian cinema is very poor. We got Clint for $15,000. Coburn wanted $25,000. I didn't see any character in Rawhide, only a physical figure. What struck me most about Clint was his indolent way of moving. It seemed to me Clint closely resembled a cat.
Get 3 coffins ready. Huh? I don't think it's nice, you laughing. See, my mule don't like people laughing. It's the crazy idea you're laughing at him. Now, if you apologize like I know you're going to, I might convince him that you really didn't mean it.
2つ。いや、多分3つだ。
My mistake. 4 coffins.
I grew up with films where, and some wonderful films, but with the exception of maybe a handful, you could pretty well anticipate where the plot was going and how the film was going to end.
Hello?
The Western was very, very stale in America at that time. John Ford, Anthony Mann, Howard Hawks was no longer making them. There was nobody who was really doing a Western in America, and the people who were doing them weren't doing anything different. So it kind of came in at an interesting moment in history when the Western was dubbed by the so-called experts as being dead.
Sergio had a very limited English vocabulary. He had, for example, learned to say, "Watch me."
Watch me. Clint, watch me. You go. Go. Immediately. Bang!
Leone had directed 2 films before, 2 of the low-budget ancient epics that were made in Italy in the late 50s and very early 60s. They were shown all over the world. Like A Fistful of Dollars, they featured one American player in an otherwise all-European cast, Steve Reeves in The Last Days of Pompeii and Rory Calhoun in The Colossus of Rhodes.
Che il più grande scrittore western è stato e sarà sempre Omero.
The greatest scriptwriter of westerns was Homer. The archetypes of yesterday's cowboys were Achilles, Ajax, Agamemnon, and Hector.
Achille, Aiace, Agamemnon, Hector.
Leone didn't feel himself bound to any mores of the American Western.
Man rides in on a 35-year-old horse, very shabby looking. He sees man kicking kid, sees woman obviously in a distraught position at the house, obviously a prisoner of sorts, and he turns and rides off.
At that time, heroes were sort of heroes and villains were villains, and what I loved about the Kurosawa piece was that it was the hero, the protagonist, was so completely self-absorbed. He didn't care about anything. It's just the manipulation. He had no altruistic kind of feelings about anything or anybody at that particular time in his career. He's a wandering samurai, or in my case, it was a wandering gunman. Yojimbo character, something I think I carried even a little further. The character is framed as very solitary, without any feeling for anyone else, and you figure he's a person who's been in a lot of wars and has long gotten over the fear of war. Now this is sort of a fantasy character. Let's face it, you never get over that fear, but in reality, but he has an understanding of himself and just figures he's there. He's going to be there for a certain period of time, and when his time is up, he's gone. If he ever had a family, we don't know about it. We might notice some loneliness or some pain in his background, but we don't know. But it's pretty well suppressed. And the suppression of it is what makes it more interesting.
The American public had no idea that Eastwood had starred in a feature film, nor would they find out for another 2 years. Back in Italy, A Fistful of Dollars was released in a single cinema in Florence for 1 week only in November 1964. The film's producers were so dubious about its potential that all the Italian names were changed to make it appear that the film was really American. Gian Maria Volonte became John Wells, and Leone took the precaution of calling himself Bob Robertson. They needn't have worried. By the end of that first week, the cinema was playing to capacity. Meanwhile, Eastwood returned to California and the routine of Rawhide.
Beyond the sun, over the mountain, there's a face my eyes hunger to see.
As Rawhide ground on, A Fistful of Dollars was released all over Europe. However, there was one problem. Its existence came to the attention of Akira Kurosawa, the director of Yojimbo, and Toho Studios of Japan. They sued.
But with me, they just told me it was a remake, and then about halfway into the remake of Fistful of Dollars, they told me not to mention too much about the fact that it was on Yojimbo because they hadn't quite settled the legal rights at that time. I said, "What are you telling me? You're telling me we're halfway through a film and you haven't bought the rights to it?" And they said, "Well, this will be taken care of in a couple days."
Because of the lawsuit, A Fistful of Dollars was prohibited from release in the USA or Britain. Its success in the rest of Europe, however, enabled Leone to embark on a sequel, the aptly named For a Few Dollars More. This in turn led to the third film of the trilogy, The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. The days of Bob Robertson were long gone. These were films by Sergio Leone. With a substantial budget, he was able to attract other American stars. Though the budget wasn't enough to deter him from returning to the desert of Almeria in southern Spain.
We were out in the desert. It was 6:45 in the morning. I said, "Sergio, I have to go to the bathroom." He said, I told him, "Jesus, I have the whole desert out there, and he wants me to go to the bathroom right out in the middle with a camera and a reflector and all that." I said, no, go, he said, and we will look.
I just picked out a lot of the wardrobe and brought it all with me. And we ended up changing the poncho. We found one in Spain that Sergio liked, that green one. Same boots I wore on Rawhide. Cigars, I bought them in a store down in Beverly Hills. They're about that long. And so I just bought a mess of them and then I'd just chop them up in 3 pieces. And I'd always have a bucket full of them. I'd always have them in different size and lengths. In one scene I'd have left off, I'd have it in one length, and if you're jumping to another sequence, I'd remember where it was.
Clint's acting style reminds me of Gary Cooper. What I liked was his calmness. I must have been like a little jittery, fidgety actor.
Water.
I was a member of the Actors Studio. I was loaded with the method, and he wasn't.
You son of a bitch! Let me go! You play with a man who's tied up! Come back! Come back!
Leone's approach to acting is a little overboard. Everything is quite heightened. I played him very, very down under everything else being sort of operatic.
Finally, the dispute with Kurosawa was settled. All 3 films were Critical reaction was less than enthusiastic, excruciatingly dopey. Newsweek. The Burn, the Gouge and the Mangle must be the most expensive, pious and repellent movie in the history of its peculiar genre. The New York Times. The way every scene ponderously stretches out means that all tension is frittered away. Monthly Film Bulletin. The temptation is hereby proved irresistible to call the good, the bad and the ugly, the bad, the dull and the interminable, if only because it is. The Times. The opposition between the views of the public and the views of the critics would be one of the persistent themes of Eastwood's career.
I thought I was onto something in making it, but whenever you do anything that's new and a little bit away, there's a lot of people that don't want to accept that. There was a lot of people who didn't want to accept the Italians making Westerns, period, or any other European. They felt it was very, very Americana and it should be only done by Americans, and there was a lot of that. We had some of those, but then there were other people who thought it was somewhat visionary and thought it was a breath of fresh air, even though it wasn't realistic, and it was operatic. It was fun, and if anything, and they were thinking anything we could do to keep the Western alive would be great.
I think he learned from Leone what kind of power a man can exercise over a production, which he might not have been able to learn or see quite so well in the Hollywood of the same era. And that notion of artistic control is really critical to the best of Eastwood's work.
Clint said when he was leaving, I've done 3 of these movies, and I'm going home now, and I'm going to have my own. I'm going to do it myself. And I thought, that's smart.
I was offered a big film called McKenna's Gold, a big, expensive extravaganza. My agents wanted me to do it in the worst way, but I never liked it. Never liked the script on it. I wanted to do this little thing, Hang 'em High. We formed El Paso and just went ahead and did that instead.
Forming a company was an unorthodox move for an actor at the time. In Spanish, Malpaso means a false step. Malpaso's first production, Hang 'em High, attracted the same critical hostility as the Leone films. It was even more successful at the box office and confirmed Eastwood's bankability as a star.
His agents and people were really casting him in that kind of late 60s movie star way. It's a big star vehicle, and it's an expensive movie, and it'll be great. It'll make a lot of money. You'll become a bigger star than you are, and so on. Which, in a sense, was true, but he found it unsatisfactory.
I tell you my dreams, and while you're listening...
I saw that film in 4 different versions: the director's version, the producer's version, and then the coalition of all the studio execs and their version, and all the versions. The director's version, the first one, was actually the best one, but that wasn't the one that was released.
I was fascinated to watch his particular kind of behavior and his movements. There's a certain line of American actors who are immensely different from British actors, and he is in the great line of, shall we say, Spencer Tracy or James Stewart or Bob Mitchum. They have a kind of dynamic lethargy. They appear to do nothing, and they do everything. And there's certainly Clint in this particular picture, the only time I've worked with him, and I hope that, of course, I will work with him again. Now that he's so fantastically important, then maybe he'll give me a job. It was very instructive, actually, to watch Clint move around these so-called classical actors, because he reduced everything to an absolute minimum. If he had, I remember, for instance, he had perhaps a 4-line speech, and he reduced it to 4 words. And it was enormously effective, much more effective than if he'd spoken the 4 lines.
The hardest thing in the world is to do nothing, and he does it very well. He gives the impression that all the other actors are overactors.
Oh, shit.
think what Clint Eastwood and Don Siegel brought to each other allowed them to enjoy one of the last really fruitful collaborations between movie star and director that used to be fairly common in the old studio days, when you had those great collaborations between people like John Ford and John Wayne and Humphrey Bogart and John Huston and Howard Hawks and Cary Grant. Well, this collaboration between Eastwood and Siegel is one of the last of those.
This isn't the OK Corral around here. This is the city of New York. We've got a system. Not much, but we're fond of it. We don't like it when some two-for-a-nickel cowboy thinks he can bend it out of shape.
Don Siegel was a montage director at Warner Brothers in the 40s. And, you know, the kind of montages, the passage of time and that sort of thing. And for montages, you had to have you had to be very clear about the images. And you had to be very precise because it had to tell a lot in 10 or 15 seconds. And, in fact, Casablanca, he did the montages in Casablanca.
Then by train or auto or foot across the rim of Africa to Casablanca in French Morocco.
We had signed this several picture deal with Universal, and so I was looking for somebody who might be an interesting choice as a director. And I said, well, they keep talking about a guy named Don Siegel. So I went back and I looked at some Siegel films, Madigan, and The Invasion of the Body Snatchers, of course, which is one of the great B movies of all time.
Don Siegel was almost the last of a certain kind of a breed of director. He did what one would call B-budget movies. Babyface Nelson, you know, taut little movies done in a very lean, efficient style.
And so we went ahead and made the movie.
Coogan's Bluff was Eastwood's first film with Siegel and his second Malpaso production. The film is an offbeat tale of a clash of two completely different American cultures. Coogan is an Arizona sheriff who pursues a fugitive all the way across America to New York.
Looking for Jimbo, eh?
Don Siegel invited me to come by the set of Coogan's Bluff, and I hung around late into the night watching them work. He moved fast. He was used to moving fast, doing small budget pictures on tight schedules. And one thing struck me very noticeably. I'd been around enough sets to know that this was unusual, which was that the star, Clint Eastwood, never left the set between setups. He never went to his trailer or went to the phone or whatever. He just hung around and watched.
The thing about Clint that takes him above other stars who are in the same rank as he is that he's never stopped learning this business. Now, I know when he was going on Rawhide for 7.5 years, the tendency after you've been on a show for a long time is to sit in your dressing room, to take it easy, to do what is easiest, to get a little bit lazy because you get bored. But he was always on the set, always observing. They had different directors in every show, watching everything that went on, constantly asking questions for 7.5 years.
Doing television is a great schooling because you're just doing things. You have to do it on a shoestring. You're doing stories that sometimes aren't so good. Some weeks they're good. Different actors coming in gives you an exposure to different ideas, different directors. And you start thinking, hey, I'd like to do it like this guy does it. Are some of them bad? You say, if I ever get a chance, I won't do it like this guy does it. I shot some stuff. I shot a few little trailer items and things because I was set to do an episode, and at least I was told that the network didn't want any actors who were on the series to direct. Well, you know, I wasn't well enough known to go direct another segment or another show, and not many actors were directing at that particular time in the 60s. So it just wasn't a thing to do.
When I first read Thomas Cullinan's novel, The Beguiled, I knew it was Don Siegel's kind of story. Macabre, seething with terror and intrigue, and a foreboding of disaster.
In 1971, Eastwood added an unusual item to Malpasser's growing catalogue. Encouraged by Don Siegel, he tried his hand at directing and made a short film on Siegel at work called The Storyteller.
Now, as the story begins, we're strangers thrown together by an accident of war. And in reality, we're strangers, most of the actors having never met before. Now it becomes the director's problem to get us to work as a team and to make us respond believably to the situations and to one another.
All right, now let's hold it. Oh, quiet off stage. Now, come on, let's go. All right?
Now we're ready. So let's take a scene and see how Don Siegel brings it to life.
Get him into the house. Come and help me. Lift.
Miss Martha, I couldn't leave him there to die.
Well, you wouldn't have had to worry about it. There's just been one less enemy soldier.
Corporal John McBurney, 66, New York.
I think he saw an opportunity to change, that he could do a serious film, something other than an action film.
A real bluebelly. There's only one way to tell if he's a Yank. How's that? Take off his pants. Yanks have tails.
Sorry, stop that nonsense.
I saw it as an opportunity to play true emotions and not totally operatic things and not lighting cannons with cigars.
Clint, Martha really obviously doesn't know if she believes you or not.
Your hands
And even though your story did affect her, her manner is going to get warmer as she begins to change the bandage on your burned hands, etc.
A few bottles left in my father's wine cellar. If the pain gets too great, I'll ask Hallie to bring you some.
It does seem like a good occasion, and I would love some wine.
It was offered for your pain, not for your pleasure.
To be sure, ma'am, it's just that sometimes the two do go together.
Corporal McBurney, you are not our guest, but a somewhat unwelcome visitor. I don't propose to entertain you here.
And I don't expect it, ma'am. It's just that I've been at war a long time. It's been months since I've seen a woman's face. Well, that short scene told us quite a lot. A lot more than was said by the actors, I think. Yeah, it gave us some insight into their characters and their personalities and relationships. I think the expressions and their reactions also gave us a pretty good hint of their likes and dislikes and secrets and fears. And to build emotion and suspense and to always keep the audience involved. It's not always easy, and not just anyone can do it. It takes a very unique kind of man, a man of many talents, a storyteller.
If he believes something, he'll stick to it. You won't be able to change his mind too much. He knows what he wants, I guess it is, and he doesn't change his mind. You know, I don't know how to express it, but if you do something that he doesn't like, he'll remember it, probably for the rest of his life. And that in itself is a strength, I think. It, not that you're unforgiven, but he has definite ideas of the way he wants things to be, and hopefully they're going to be that way.
Truly hitting the big time tomorrow night, the inside story of Dirty Harry and Play Misty for Me, part 2 of this arena special, 9:20 BBC 2. Next tonight, Clint Eastwood and Don Siegel combine forces for the masterly Escape from Alcatraz.
It felt like betrayal.